Millionaire CEO sees a single father in the rain, not realizing he was her best employee. The windshield wipers of Celeste's Mercedes beat a steady rhythm against the October storm, but they couldn't quite keep up with the deluge. She'd left the quarterly board meeting early, something she never did, because the walls of the Mel Brock Hotel's executive conference room had started closing in on her. Another presentation about profit margins and occupancy rates. Another round of congratulations for her visionary leadership of the luxury property her father had built from nothing. Another evening stretching ahead in her empty mansion overlooking the Pacific. 24 years old, and she'd already mastered the art of smiling while drowning. The coastal highway curved through dense pine forests, the kind of winding road that demanded attention even in good weather. In this storm, it required absolute focus, which was why she almost didn't see him. Almost. The blue Harley-Davidson caught her eye first, that particular shade of cobalt that stood out even through the rain-blurred windshield. Then the figure beside it, a man crouched in the downpour, his white t-shirt plastered to his back as he examined the motorcycle's engine. No rain jacket, no umbrella, just him and his broken bike on the side of a highway miles from anywhere. Celeste's foot moved to the brake before her brain finished processing the scene. She'd been raised to help people. Her father, Edward Davenport, had drilled it into her. We have wealth, Celeste, which means we have responsibility. But she'd also been raised by a mother who'd warned her about stopping for strangers on isolated roads. The contradiction had paralyzed her more times than she cared to admit. Today, watching the man's shoulders hunch against the rain as he fought with something in the engine, something inside her broke free of the paralysis. She pulled onto the shoulder 20 feet ahead of the motorcycle, her hazard lights adding their orange pulse to the gray afternoon. Through the rear-view mirror, she watched him straighten up, turning to look at her car with obvious confusion. He said something, she could see his lips move, probably telling her to keep driving, that he was fine. Men and their pride. She knew that particular brand of stubbornness well enough. Celeste grabbed the emergency poncho from her glove compartment, the one her assistant had insisted she keep in the car, and stepped out into the storm. The rain hit her like a physical thing, immediately soaking through her royal blue blazer despite the poncho. Her designer heels found uncertain purchase on the muddy shoulder as she made her way back to him. "You're going to catch pneumonia," she called out over the sound of rain hammering against asphalt. He looked up, and even through the rain streaming down his face she could see the surprise in his dark eyes. Strong features, the kind that came from good bones rather than careful grooming. A day's worth of stubble on his jaw, probably late 20s, though the exhaustion in his eyes suggested someone who'd lived harder than his years indicated. "I appreciate the concern," he said, his voice carrying easily despite the storm. "But I'm already soaked. No point in you getting wet too. Too late for that." Celeste moved closer, peering at the motorcycle. "What's wrong with it? If I knew that, I wouldn't be standing here in a monsoon." A flash of humor crossed his face, there and gone. "Electrical system's dead. Won't turn over. Won't even give me running lights. And my phone decided to die about the same time because apparently the universe has a sense of humor today." She studied the Harley more closely. The bike was older, probably late 90s, early 2000s, but meticulously maintained. Chrome that still shone despite the weather, not a spot of rust anywhere. The kind of care that spoke of love rather than just transportation. "Do you live far from here?" she asked. "About 15 miles south. I work at the Mel Brock Hotel." He said it with quiet pride, no embarrassment about the admission. "Second shift maintenance, or I would be if I could get this girl to cooperate." Something twisted in Celeste's chest. Her hotel. He worked at her hotel, and here he was stranded on a highway in a storm, probably going to be late for his shift and risk disciplinary action. She thought about the memo she'd approved last month about attendance policies, how the operations manager had insisted they needed to tighten standards. The memo suddenly felt cruel. "I'm heading south," she heard herself say. "I can give you a ride. You can call a tow truck from the hotel." He hesitated, and she watched the internal calculation play out on his face. Pride versus practicality. The desire to handle his own problems versus the reality that he was going to be late to work. "I can't leave her here," he finally said, nodding at the Harley. "This bike, it's important." The way he said it made Celeste look at the motorcycle again. Not just well-maintained. Loved. The kind of love that went beyond metal and chrome, that somehow encompassed memories and meanings she couldn't quite parse. "Is it an antique?" she asked. "Not officially, but she's 26 years old, which might as well be ancient in motorcycle years." He ran his hand along the seat, a gesture so tender it made Celeste feel like she was intruding on something private. And she belonged to someone important, someone who... He stopped, shook his head. Sorry, you don't need my life story. You need to get out of this rain. But Celeste found she didn't want to leave. Standing here in the storm talking to this stranger about his beloved motorcycle felt more real than anything she'd experienced in months, maybe years. Let me make a call, she said, pulling out her phone. I know a towing service that can get here fast. They can take it directly to a shop or to your place, whichever you prefer. My treat. I can't let you. You can, and you will. Because standing here arguing about it is ridiculous when we're both getting hypothermia. She was already scrolling through her contacts, looking for Jim's number. Jim had towed her father's vintage Corvette more times than she could count. Considerate payment for me not having to feel guilty about driving past someone stranded in a storm. The corner of his mouth twitched. When you put it that way, I guess I'd be the jerk for saying no. Exactly. Jim answered on the second ring. His gravelly voice warmed despite the business transaction. Celeste Davenport. It's been a while. Hi Jim, I need a favor. There's a Harley Davidson broken down on Coast Highway, about 10 miles north of the hotel. Can you get here fast? For you, 20 minutes, give me the details. She handed her phone to the stranger. Tell him where you want the bike taken. He looked at the phone like it might bite him, then took it with careful hands. His conversation with Jim was brief and efficient. The address of a garage in town, some technical questions about trailer size, confirmation of the bike's year and model. When he handed the phone back, his expression was complicated. Thank you, he said simply. I'll pay you back for the tow. It might take a few weeks, but don't. The word came out sharper than she intended. Celeste softened her tone. Really? Just let me do something decent today. Please. Their eyes met, and something passed between them. Recognition maybe of similar wounds differently dressed. She saw him really look at her for the first time, taking in the expensive poncho that wasn't doing much good, the blazer that probably cost more than his motorcycle, the face that business magazines had called the young queen of hospitality empire. But his expression didn't change to the usual calculation she was used to seeing. No sudden awareness of opportunity, no shift in demeanor from genuine to performative, just the same steady regard, with maybe a touch of curiosity. All right, he said finally, but I'm buying you coffee sometime to say thanks properly. Deal. She smiled despite the cold water running down her back. But we should probably get out of this rain before we both need medical attention. Come on. He grabbed a worn leather saddlebag from the Harley, giving the bike one last look that felt like an apology, then followed her to the Mercedes. They were both dripping by the time they got in, and Celeste cranked the heat up to maximum. I'm Ryan, by the way, he said as she pulled back onto the highway. Ryan Walker. Celeste. She almost added her last name out of habit, then decided against it. There was something liberating about him not knowing who she was, not seeing her as the CEO or the heiress or the youngest person to run a 5-star hotel. Just Celeste, helping a stranger in the rain. Celeste Davenport. She felt his head turn toward her, saw his profile in her peripheral vision as understanding dawned. He stopped, seemed to recalibrate. You own the Mel Brock. Technically, yes. She kept her eyes on the road, watching the white lines disappear into the spray from her tires. Though my father built it, I'm just trying not to ruin his legacy. From what I hear, you're doing more than that. The renovation of the South Wing last year was impressive. Original 1920s architecture preserved while modernizing all the systems. There was genuine appreciation in his voice, not flattery. That kind of respect for a building's history while making it functional for today, that's rare. Celeste glanced at him surprised. You noticed all that? I work maintenance, it's my job to notice. Ryan adjusted the air vent, directing warm air toward his soaked jeans. Plus, I actually care about the place. Your father built something special. The Mel Brock has good bones, literally and metaphorically. You said belonged to someone important, she found herself saying, thinking about how he'd touched the motorcycle. The Harley. Who did it belong to? Silence filled the car, broken only by the heater's hum and the rain's percussion on the roof. Celeste almost apologized for asking, but something made her wait. My mentor, Ryan finally said. Man who taught me everything about motorcycles, about work, about being decent, I guess. He died 2 years ago. Left me the Harley in his will. It's a 99, same year I was born. He used to joke that we were twins, both a little rough around the edges, both built to last. The grief in his voice was old but not faded, the kind that had learned to coexist with daily life without ever really leaving. I'm sorry, Celeste said, and meant it. Thanks. He cleared his throat. He was a good man. Worked maintenance at the Melbrock for 30 years before he retired. Actually, that's how I got my job there. He put in a word for me with the operations manager before he died, made me promise I'd take care of his hotel. A soft laugh, as if I could own the place just by working there. Celeste's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Taking care of something doesn't require ownership. Sometimes the people who care most are the ones who show up every day and do the work. That's a generous way to look at it. It's the true way to look at it. She signaled for the exit that would take them to the hotel, the familiar drive she made twice a day. My father used to say the hotel belonged to everyone who loved it. Not in a legal sense, but in the sense that matters. You can own a property and not care about it at all, or you can be paid to work there and treat it like it's precious. Your father sounds like he was a wise man. He was. The words caught in her throat. He died 3 years ago. Heart attack in the middle of a Friday service. He was checking on the kitchen's new equipment, making sure the installation was done right. Just collapsed. I'm sorry. Ryan's voice matched the sincerity she'd offered him moments ago. That's a hard way to lose someone. The hardest part was that I wasn't surprised. Celeste took the curve of the exit ramp carefully, the Mercedes handling smoothly despite the wet road. He worked himself to death. Everyone told him to slow down, to delegate, to retire. But the hotel was his life. He couldn't imagine himself without it. And now you're running it. And now I'm running it. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. 24 years old, barely out of college, suddenly responsible for 200 employees and a property that's been featured in every luxury travel magazine in existence. No pressure. How long ago did you take over? Officially, 2 years ago. But I've been learning the business since I could walk. Dad had me shadowing him every summer, every school break. I know every inch of that building. She pulled into the hotel's employee entrance, the back lot that led to the staff areas. Knowing the building and knowing how to run it are different things, though. Ryan didn't offer empty reassurances or platitudes about her doing fine. Instead, he looked at her with something like understanding. It's lonely at the top, isn't it? The observation hit so close to the bone that Celeste had to take a breath before answering. Every day. She parked near the entrance and they sat in the warm car for a moment, neither moving to get out despite the rain lessening to a steady drizzle. The easy intimacy of the conversation felt too fragile to break. Can I ask you something? Ryan said. And you can tell me to mind my own business if it's too personal. Go ahead. Why were you driving on that highway in the middle of a workday? You don't strike me as someone who takes random drives during business hours. Celeste stared at the rain on the windshield, watching drops race each other down the glass. I was running away. Not permanently, just for an hour or two. Sometimes I sit in those meetings and realize I can't remember the last time I felt anything real. Just numbers and projections and strategic planning. And I panic, wondering if this is all there is for the rest of my life. That's the most honest thing anyone said to me in months, Ryan said quietly. She turned to look at him, really look at him. In the relative warmth and light of the parking lot, she could see him more clearly. Strong jaw, dark eyes that had seen their share of hardship, hands calloused from work, but somehow gentle in their movements. There was a stillness about him, a quality of actually being present in the moment that she found simultaneously attractive and slightly terrifying. Most people she met were always performing, always aware of her status, and calibrating their responses accordingly. Ryan just was himself, without decoration or pretense. I should let you get to your shift, she said, though part of her wanted to keep sitting here, keep talking to this stranger who somehow felt less like a stranger with every passing minute. Yeah, but he didn't move either. Thank you again, for stopping, for the tow, for the ride, and for, he paused, seeming to search for words, for treating me like a person. Not everyone does. I should be thanking you for the same thing. Their eyes met, and Celeste felt that twist in her chest again. Danger, some part of her brain whispered. This man could hurt you. Not physically, but in all the ways that mattered more. He could make you feel things you've been carefully avoiding. He could remind you what it means to be human instead of just a CEO. Ryan opened the door and the moment broke. Cool air rushed in, carrying the smell of rain and wet asphalt. He grabbed his saddlebag, then paused halfway out of the car. That coffee I owe you, he said. I meant it. Not as some grand gesture, just, I'd like to talk to you again. When I'm not soaking wet and stranded. Celeste found herself smiling. I'd like that too. Tomorrow? There's a good place downtown, Paolo's. Best coffee on the coast, according to people who care about such things. I'm more of a any caffeine will do guy, but even I can tell the difference. Tomorrow works. What time? I get off at 6. 7 o'clock? 7 is perfect. He nodded, stepped out into the drizzle, then leaned back down to look at her through the open door. Be careful driving home in this weather, Celeste Davenport, who's just trying not to ruin her father's legacy. Be careful not to electrocute yourself with faulty wiring, Ryan Walker, who takes care of places he loves. His grin was genuine, transforming his face from merely handsome to something that made her heartbeat stutter. Then he closed the door and jogged toward the employee entrance, his saddlebag held over his head as makeshift rain protection. Celeste sat in her car watching him disappear into the building and realized she was smiling. Actually smiling. Not the professional mask she'd perfected over the last 2 years, but a real expression of something dangerously close to happiness. Her phone buzzed. A text from her assistant. Board members asking about your early departure. Everything okay? She looked at the message. At the building where Ryan had just entered. At the rain finally beginning to clear. For the first time in longer than she could remember, the answer felt complicated in a way that wasn't entirely negative. Everything's fine, she typed back. Just had something important come up. The drive home passed in a blur of thoughts she couldn't quite organize. By the time she pulled into her mansion's circular driveway, the sun had broken through the clouds, painting everything in that peculiar golden light that comes after storms. Inside, the house echoed with its usual emptiness. 15,000 square feet of luxury with nothing to fill it but Celeste and the cleaning service that came twice a week. Her divorce from Marcus had been final for 6 months now, a marriage that had lasted less than a year, a union of wealthy families more than a union of hearts. Her mother had been devastated by the divorce. Her father would have understood. He'd never liked Marcus anyway. Celeste changed out of her wet clothes, hung the blazer up to dry, and tried to work on the quarterly reports that needed her review. But her mind kept drifting back to the highway, to rain-soaked shoulders and a blue Harley-Davidson, to a conversation that had felt more real than anything in her carefully constructed life. At midnight, she gave up on sleep and went to her father's study, the one room in the house she'd kept exactly as he'd left it. His desk still held the fountain pen he'd been using that last morning, his reading glasses folded beside his favorite photo of her mother. I met someone today, she said to the empty room, to the ghost of Edward Davenport. Well, I helped someone, a man with a broken motorcycle. He works at the hotel, Dad, in maintenance, and I think I felt something for the first time since you died. The room offered no answers, but then again it never did. That was the thing about grief. You carried it everywhere, had conversations with the dead, and called it healing. Her phone lit up with an incoming text from an unknown number. Jim gave me your number. Hope that's okay. Just wanted to let you know the Harley's safe at Mike's garage. He'll look at it first thing tomorrow and to say thanks one more time. Sleep well, Celeste Davenport. Ryan. She stared at the message, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. Professional distance would suggest a simple acknowledgement. Common sense would say don't engage further. Her lawyer's voice in her head reminded her about the liability of personal relationships with employees. But Celeste had spent 2 years being professional and sensible and listening to lawyers. Glad the bike made it safely, she typed. Looking forward to that coffee tomorrow, and Ryan, just Celeste is fine. Just, the full name makes me feel like I'm at a board meeting. His response came quickly. Understood, just Celeste it is. Sweet dreams. She went to bed with her phone on the nightstand, that small exchange of messages somehow feeling more significant than all the contracts she'd signed that week. The next morning arrived with unseasonable warmth, as if October had decided to apologize for yesterday's storm. Celeste arrived at the hotel at 7 sharp, as always, and threw herself into the day's agenda with practiced efficiency. Executive meeting, walkthrough of the restaurant renovation, call with the regional tourism board, review of next quarter's marketing budget. By 3 in the afternoon, she'd almost convinced herself that yesterday had been an aberration, just a random moment of connection that would dissolve in the light of day. Ryan would probably cancel coffee or show up and be awkward, or she'd realize he wasn't at all what she'd imagined in the rain-soaked intimacy of her car. She was reviewing payroll reports when her assistant, Margaret, knocked on her office door. Ms. Davenport? There's a situation with the air conditioning in the West Wing. Maintenance is on it, but they're saying it might be a bigger issue than initially thought. Guest complaints are starting to come in. Celeste stood immediately. How big an issue? Could be the entire HVAC system for that section. They're trying to isolate the problem now. I'll come down and assess. She grabbed her tablet, already pulling up the building schematics. Which maintenance team is on it? Ryan Walker and Tom Chen. Ryan's apparently some kind of miracle worker with the old systems. He found the problem in 20 minutes when it was baffling everyone else. Celeste's heart did that stupid stuttering thing again. Lead the way. The West Wing's mechanical room was located in the basement, a maze of pipes and ducts and equipment that dated back to the hotel's original construction. Celeste had been down here exactly 3 times in her tenure, once during orientation, once during the South Wing renovation, and once when her father had insisted she learn every corner of the building. She found Ryan and Tom crouched beside a massive air handler, both in their blue uniforms, both focused intently on something in the guts of the machine. Tom was holding a flashlight while Ryan had his hands deep in the equipment, his yellow gloves standing out against the dim metal. "Tell me the damage," Celeste said. Both men looked up. Tom immediately straightened, professional deference snapping into place. Ryan's expression flickered through surprise, recognition, and something that might have been pleasure before settling into neutral professionalism. "Ms. Davenport," Tom said, "the compressor's shot. Been running hot for probably weeks, maybe months. Finally gave up the ghost this morning. Can it be repaired?" Ryan pulled his hands out of the machine, wiping them on a rag. "Not this one. It's original equipment from 1995. We can patch it temporarily, maybe get another week out of it, but it'll fail again. And when it does, it could take out the whole system instead of just the compressor. How long for replacement? Parts are available. If we order today and pay for expedited shipping, we could have everything by Friday. Installation would take the weekend." Ryan met her eyes steadily. No trace of yesterday's easy intimacy, just professional assessment. "Expensive, though. Industrial compressor of this size plus labor for weekend installation, you're looking at $30,000 minimum." Celeste did the mental math. $30,000 against the cost of guest complaints, bad reviews, potential room credits, and refunds. Order the parts. Get it done right. "Yes, ma'am." Tom pulled out his phone, already looking up supplier numbers. Ryan started gathering tools, efficient movements that spoke of years of practice. Celeste found herself watching his hands. The same hands that had touched his motorcycle with such tenderness yesterday, now competent and sure with machinery. "Ryan, a word?" she said. He glanced at Tom, who waved him off. "Go ahead. I've got this." They walked a few feet away, far enough for privacy, but still in view of the mechanical room. Under the fluorescent lights, Celeste could see him more clearly than she had in the rain. Tired eyes, yes, but intelligent. A small scar on his left temple. The kind of build that came from actual labor, not gym vanity. "Thank you for finding the problem so quickly," she said. "Just doing my job. According to Margaret, you did it in 20 minutes when everyone else was baffled." A slight shrug. "I've been working with these systems for 5 years. You learn the patterns, the weak points. Plus your father kept meticulous maintenance logs. I've read through all of them. Kind of like getting a masterclass from him directly." The mention of her father squeezed Celeste's chest. He'd appreciate knowing someone still reads those logs. "They're basically a love letter to this building," Ryan said quietly. "Every entry, every note. You can tell he cared about getting things right. Not just functional, but understood, respected." They stood in awkward silence for a moment. Yesterday's ease seemingly evaporated in the fluorescent-lit reality of employer and employee. "Are we still on for coffee?" Ryan asked, his voice careful. "I understand if the work thing makes it weird." 7 o'clock. Celeste confirmed. "Unless you think it's a problem?" "Depends. Are you worried about what people will think?" "People have thought all sorts of things about me since I took over. One more opinion won't make a difference." She smiled slightly. "Besides, you're buying. I never turned down free coffee." "That's not exactly what I said." "Too late. You offered, I'm collecting." His grin broke through the professional mask. "Just for a second." "All right then. See you at 7, just Celeste." She left him to his work, walking back through the basement with her heart doing complicated gymnastics. This was stupid. This was dangerous. This was potentially a human resources nightmare waiting to happen. This was also the first time in 2 years she'd felt genuinely alive. The afternoon crawled by. Celeste forced herself through meetings and decisions, but her mind kept drifting to Paolo's coffee house. To what she'd wear? Casual, definitely casual. Maybe the jeans and the white blouse. To whether this was a date or just coffee as promised. At 6:30, she was standing in her walk-in closet at home, having changed outfits 3 times. The royal blue blazer felt too corporate. The sundress felt too datish. She finally settled on dark jeans, ankle boots, and a soft cream sweater that her ex-husband had said made her look too accessible. Perfect. Paolo's was a 10-minute drive from her house, a small place tucked between a bookstore and a vintage record shop. Celeste had driven past it 100 times but never went in. Her assistant brought her coffee from the chain place near the hotel. But walking through the door at 6:55, she understood immediately why Ryan had chosen it. The space was warm and genuine, all exposed brick and mismatched furniture, with actual books on shelves and local art on the walls. It smelled like coffee beans and cinnamon, with an undertone of wood polish. The kind of place that existed because someone loved it, not because they'd calculated profit margins. Ryan was already there, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups in front of him. He'd changed into jeans and a dark gray Henley, his hair still damp from what must have been a very quick shower. When he saw her, his face did something complicated. Relief, pleasure, nervousness all blended together. "I ordered you a latte," he said as she sat down. "But I realized I have no idea if you even like lattes, so if that's wrong, I'll go get something else. Lattes are perfect." She wrapped her hands around the warm cup, inhaling the steam. "Thank you. For the record, I did intend to buy your coffee. You just preemptively claimed it." Semantics. They smiled at each other, and just like that, yesterday's ease returned. The mechanical room and the professional boundaries dissolved, leaving just 2 people sitting in a coffee shop on a Tuesday evening. "How's the Harley?" Celeste asked. "Mike called this afternoon. Bad news and good news." "Bad news. The electrical system is pretty much shot. Corroded wiring, failed voltage regulator, the works. Good news. It's all fixable, and he can get the parts." "That sounds expensive. $1,300. Ryan said it without inflection, but Celeste saw the tightness around his eyes. "Which is about what I have saved for emergencies, so it's fine." It wasn't fine. She could read that clearly. $1,300 that was supposed to be his safety net, now gone to fix a motorcycle that was 26 years old and probably not worth half that in market value. But before she could say anything, Ryan continued, "Worth every penny, though. That bike. It's not just transportation. It's the last thing connecting me to Tom. Tom Brennan, my mentor, the man who taught me everything." "Tell me about him," Celeste said. Ryan's expression softened, taking on that quality she'd noticed yesterday when he talked about his mentor. He was one of those rare people who actually lived what they believed. He'd worked at the Melbrook for 30 years, right? Never got promoted past maintenance supervisor, never made a big salary. But he loved that job like it was the most important thing in the world. Why? Because he believed that taking care of things mattered, that showing up every day and doing your work with dignity mattered, that you could find meaning in making sure a building stood strong and served people well. Ryan took a sip of his coffee. He used to say, "Ryan, you can either go through life looking for the next shiny thing, or you can find the sacred in what's right in front of you." The Melbrook was sacred to him. Celeste felt tears prick her eyes. "My father would have liked him. They knew each other, not well. Your dad was the owner, Tom was maintenance. But they'd talk sometimes when your father would do his walkthroughs. Tom said Edward Davenport was the only owner he'd ever met who actually understood buildings, not just as investments but as living things that needed care. Dad used to say buildings had souls," Celeste said softly, "that you could feel whether a place was loved or just used. The Melbrook has a soul because people like your Tom poured 30 years of care into it, and because people like your father built it with intention, not just profit." They sat with that for a moment, the weight of inheritance and legacy hovering between them. "Can I ask you something that might be too personal?" Ryan said. "You keep asking permission to ask personal questions. At this point, I think we've established it's okay. Why'd you really stop yesterday, on the highway? You could have driven past, called someone else to help. But you stopped, got out in the rain, helped a complete stranger." Celeste traced the rim of her coffee cup, considering the question. "Honestly, I don't know. Maybe I was tired of driving past. I spend so much of my life behind walls, literal and metaphorical. The mansion, the executive office, the careful distance I keep from everyone. And there you were, soaked and fighting with a motorcycle that meant something to you, and I wanted to help. I wanted to do something real." "Real," Ryan repeated. "That's an interesting word choice. Most of my life doesn't feel real anymore. It's performance. I say the right things in meetings, make the right decisions for the hotel, smile for the business magazine interviews. I'm very good at being Celeste Davenport, CEO, but I'm not sure I remember how to be just Celeste. I think you're doing okay at it right now." She looked up to find him watching her with an expression that was almost tender. Not pitying, not calculating, just seeing her, really seeing her, the way people used to before she inherited everything. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Fair's fair. How did your Tom die?" Ryan's jaw tightened and she almost told him to forget it, but he shook his head. Motorcycle accident. Not the Harley. His other bike, the newer one he'd bought for long-distance trips. He was on Highway 1, riding up to see his daughter in San Francisco. Truck driver fell asleep, drifted into his lane. His voice remained steady, but his hands clenched around his coffee cup. They said he died instantly. I hope that's true. I hope he didn't have time to be scared. I'm so sorry. Me too. He was only 62, had so many years left. Plans to travel more, to finally see Ireland where his grandparents came from. He'd just started dating someone, this nice woman from the bookstore next door. He was happy, Celeste. Really genuinely happy, and then he was just gone. When you said the Harley was important, it's all I have left of him. Ryan's voice cracked slightly. His apartment was rented and his daughter needed to clear it out fast. She kept the important stuff, photos, his tools, his books. But she didn't want the Harley, said it was too old, too much trouble. So Tom had put it in his will that it should go to me, along with about $5,000 that I used for my daughters. He stopped abruptly. Celeste's brain snagged on the word. Your daughter? Yeah. He looked uncomfortable. Hannah. She's 7. Lives with her mother in Portland most of the year, but visits during summers and some holidays. You're a father. Is that a problem? His voice had gone careful, defensive. No, it's just, you didn't mention her yesterday. We were talking about motorcycles and dead mentors. Not exactly, hey, by the way, I have a kid territory. Ryan studied her face. Does it change things? Celeste tried to process this new information. Ryan wasn't just the handsome maintenance worker with a broken motorcycle and a dead mentor. He was a father, which meant there was a mother somewhere, which meant there was history and complications she hadn't considered. What happened with her mother? She asked. We were together for 3 years, engaged for 1. Then Hannah came along. Surprise pregnancy. We weren't planning it. Sarah, that's Hannah's mom. She tried. We both tried. But she'd just gotten into grad school at Portland State and I was working 2 jobs to keep us afloat. And we were so young and so tired. He shook his head. She left when Hannah was 6 months old. Moved to Portland for school. We split custody, sort of. Mostly Hannah lives with Sarah and her new husband comes down here when she can. That must be hard. It's the worst thing about my life, Ryan said simply. I love my daughter more than anything, and I get to see her maybe 8 weeks a year. But Sarah's got the stable situation. Good job, nice house, stepdad who actually loves Hannah. I'm the guy in the studio apartment who works maintenance and fixes motorcycles. What judge would give me primary custody? The kind that cares about which parent actually loves spending time with their child? You haven't met many family court judges, have you? His smile was bitter. The system favors stability, income, dual-parent households. It doesn't care that I'd give everything to have Hannah with me full-time. Celeste reached across the table, covered his hand with hers. The gesture was impulse, but she didn't pull away. That's not fair. Life rarely is. But he didn't move his hand either. Sorry. This is probably too heavy for a first. Whatever this is. Coffee, Celeste said. This is coffee that you're buying to thank me for stopping in the rain. No rules about what we can talk about. In that case, I'm going to ask something that's definitely too personal. Ryan's thumb traced along her knuckles, the touch light and questioning. You mentioned being divorced yesterday. Brief marriage, you said. What happened? The short version? I married someone my mother approved of. Someone from the right family with the right credentials. Marcus Holbrook. His family owns a pharmaceutical company. We met at a charity gala, dated for 6 months, got engaged because it made sense on paper. She could hear the emptiness in her own voice. The marriage lasted 9 months. We were never really together even when we were married. Just 2 people living in the same house, attending the same events, performing the same script. Did you love him? I thought I did. Or maybe I just loved the idea of not being alone. Celeste looked down at their hands, still touching on the coffee-stained table. He was cruel in small ways. Never anything dramatic enough to call abuse, just death by 1,000 cuts. He'd point out when I gained weight, correct me in public, make jokes about my business decisions. My mother said that's just how marriages work. You compromise, you adapt. Your mother's wrong, Ryan said flatly. That's not compromise, that's erasure. Yeah, the word came out shaky. I figured that out eventually. Filed for divorce on my 23rd birthday. He fought it for a while, then gave up when he started dating his assistant. She's younger and more willing to be molded into whatever he wants. I hope she figures it out faster than I did. They sat there, hands still touching, the coffee shop bustling around them with its normal Tuesday evening energy. Students studying, couples on dates, people just passing time in a place that felt safe. We're kind of a mess, aren't we? Ryan said finally, a hint of humor in his voice. Absolute disasters, Celeste agreed. You with your broken custody arrangements and deceased mentor. Me with my empty mansion and my father's legacy crushing me. When you put it that way, we sound like a country song. She laughed, surprised by the sound coming from her own throat. The worst country song ever written. Hey now, I like country music, don't insult the genre. You like country music? Top 40 stuff is garbage. But the real country, the stuff about actual life and actual people, that's good storytelling. He grinned at her expression. What? I'm not allowed to have unexpected taste in music? I'm just recalibrating my mental image of you. Fair. I'm recalibrating my image of you too. When I first saw you on the highway, I figured you for someone who'd never done anything difficult in her life. Rich girl playing at running a business. And now? Now I think you're someone who shows up despite everything telling you not to. Who stops for strangers in storms. Who actually tries to run a business she inherited way too young while dealing with grief that hasn't healed. His expression turned serious. You're stronger than you give yourself credit for, Celeste. The words hit something deep and tender, a place she'd been carefully protecting for years. She felt her eyes start to burn and blinked hard against the tears. I'm not strong, she whispered. I'm just going through the motions, because I don't know what else to do. That's exactly what strength is. Showing up when it would be easier to hide. Their eyes met, and Celeste felt the world narrow to just this table, this moment, this man who'd somehow become important in less than 24 hours. Dangerous, her brain warned again. This could hurt so much. But maybe, another part of her whispered, it could also heal. I should let you go, Ryan said eventually, though he didn't move to stand. It's getting late and I have the early shift tomorrow. Right, yes. But Celeste didn't want to leave. She wanted to sit here all night, drinking bad coffee and talking about real things with someone who didn't need her to be anything but herself. They stood together, and Ryan insisted on walking her to her car despite her protests. The evening air had turned cool, carrying the salt smell of the ocean a few blocks away. The street was quiet, just the two of them, and the ambient glow of streetlights. At her Mercedes, they stood awkwardly for a moment, neither quite sure how to end the evening. Can I see you again? Ryan asked. And I don't mean at the hotel, with the whole boss-employee thing hanging over us. I mean like this. Coffee, or dinner, or something. That would be complicated, Celeste said. I know. People would talk. There are policies about fraternization. My board would have opinions. I know. I could lose you as an employee if this goes badly. I know. Ryan's hand came up, almost touching her face before stopping just short. But I'm asking anyway, because yesterday in the rain I felt something I haven't felt in years. And today, sitting across from you while you told me about your disaster of a marriage, I realized I want to keep feeling it. Celeste closed the distance between his hand and her face, leaning into his palm. His skin was rough with work calluses but gentle in its touch. I want that too, even though it scares me. It scares me too. So what do? We could be sensible adults and walk away. Preserve the professional relationship. Avoid complications. His thumb traced along her cheekbone. Or we could be reckless and see where this goes, knowing it might be a beautiful disaster. I've been sensible my entire life, Celeste heard herself say. Maybe it's time to be reckless. Ryan's smile was slow and devastating. Tomorrow's my day off. There's a beach about 20 minutes north. Hardly anyone goes there. Good for walking, thinking, pretending the rest of the world doesn't exist for a few hours. Want to meet me there? Around noon? Yes. The word came out without hesitation, without the careful calculation that usually preceded her decisions. You sure? Because once we do this, once we step outside the boundaries of what's appropriate and professional, there's no going back to just being the CEO and the maintenance guy. Celeste looked at him standing in the amber glow of the streetlight, this man who'd somehow become essential in less than 48 hours. She thought about her carefully ordered life, her empty mansion, her days filled with meetings that meant everything and nothing. She thought about her father's voice telling her that the biggest disaster was never really living. I'm sure, she said. Terrified, but sure. Good terrified or bad terrified? The kind that means something actually matters. She took a breath. Ryan, I need you to understand something. I'm not good at this, at letting people in, at being vulnerable. I've built walls so high I can barely see over them anymore. If we do this, I'm going to mess it up. I'm going to panic and try to push you away. Or I'm going to overthink everything until it stops being real. And I need you to understand that I come with baggage most people wouldn't sign up for, Ryan countered. A daughter I barely see. An ex who has good reason to think I'm not stable enough to be a primary parent, a studio apartment, and a 26-year-old motorcycle that keeps breaking down. I work maintenance for a living, Celeste. I'll never be able to take you to the places you're used to. Never fit into your world the way someone like Marcus probably did. Marcus fit into my world perfectly, and that world almost killed me, Celeste said quietly. Maybe I don't want someone who fits. Maybe I want someone who makes me question whether I've built the right world at all. They stood there in the cool evening air, the space between them charged with possibility and fear, and something that felt dangerously close to hope. Noon tomorrow, Ryan said finally. I'll text you the address of the beach. Wear comfortable shoes and bring a jacket. It'll be windy. Anything else? Just yourself. The real version, not the CEO version. No performance, no armor, just Celeste. I'm not sure I remember who that is anymore. Then maybe we'll figure it out together. Good. He stepped back, breaking the contact between them. Drive safe, Celeste. And think about what you're getting into. I'm not an easy choice. Easy choices haven't gotten me anywhere worth being. She drove home with his words echoing in her head, with the ghost of his touch still warm on her face. The highway was mostly empty at this hour, just her and the occasional truck driver making late-night runs. She rolled down the windows despite the chill, wanting to feel something real against her skin. In her mansion's driveway, she sat in the car for a long moment, watching the house's windows reflect the moonlight. 15,000 square feet of carefully curated emptiness. She'd hired an interior designer after the divorce, someone who'd promised to make the space feel welcoming and personal. The result was magazine perfect and utterly soulless. All neutral tones and carefully arranged objects that looked beautiful but meant nothing. Her phone buzzed with a text from Margaret. Tomorrow's schedule confirmed. Board meeting at 10, lunch with tourism director at 12:30, contractor walkthrough at 3. Celeste stared at the message, at the life mapped out in 30-minute increments, at the careful choreography that kept her moving but never actually going anywhere. She thought about Ryan's studio apartment that he'd mentioned in passing. Small enough that he'd probably never feel lost in it, filled with things that actually mattered to him. She opened a new text to Margaret. Cancel the lunch meeting. Something important came up. The response came within seconds. Everything okay? This is the third meeting you've canceled this week. Third? Had it only been a week since she'd started feeling like the walls were closing in? It felt like years. Everything's fine, Celeste typed back. Just need to handle some personal business. I'll explain later. Inside the house, she went through the motions of her evening routine, changed out of her work clothes, hung them in the closet that could double as a small apartment, made herself a salad she didn't really want, ate it standing at the kitchen island, while scrolling through emails on her tablet, responded to messages, approved requests, maintained the machinery of her business life. But her mind was at a beach 20 minutes north of here, walking beside a man who carried his grief and his hopes with equal dignity. At 11, she gave up on pretending to work and went to her father's study, the one room in the house she'd kept exactly as he'd left it. His desk still held the fountain pen he'd been using that last morning, his reading glasses folded beside his favorite photo of her mother from their wedding day, young and hopeful, and utterly unaware of what life would bring. Celeste sank into his leather chair, the one that still smelled faintly of his cologne even after 3 years. She'd never told anyone this, but she came here most nights, sat in his chair, talked to the empty room, pretended he was still alive to offer advice. I met someone today, Dad, she said to the silence. Well, I helped someone yesterday, a man with a broken motorcycle. He works at the hotel in maintenance, and I think I felt something for the first time since you died. The room offered no answers, but then again it never did. That was the thing about grief. You carried it everywhere, had conversations with the dead, and called it healing. Her phone lit up with an incoming text from an unknown number. Jim gave me your number. Hope that's okay. Just wanted to let you know the Harley's safe at Mike's garage. He'll look at it first thing tomorrow and to say thanks one more time. Sleep well, Celeste Davenport. Ryan. She stared at the message, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. Professional distance would suggest a simple acknowledgement. Common sense would say don't engage further. Her lawyer's voice in her head reminded her about the liability of personal relationships with employees. Her mother would probably have a heart attack if she knew Celeste was even considering, whatever this was. But Celeste had spent 2 years being professional and sensible, and listening to lawyers and keeping her mother happy. 2 years of doing everything right and feeling absolutely nothing except the hollow ache of going through motions. Glad the bike made it safely, she typed. Looking forward to that coffee tomorrow. And Ryan? Just Celeste is fine. The full name makes me feel like I'm at a board meeting. His response came quickly. Understood. Just Celeste it is. Sweet dreams. Two words that shouldn't have meant anything but somehow meant everything. Sweet dreams. When was the last time someone had wished her sweet dreams? Marcus certainly never had. Their marriage had been conducted in cool professionalism even in their bedroom. Her mother's goodnight calls always ended with reminders about meetings or appearances or responsibilities. But Ryan, a man she'd met yesterday in a rainstorm, a man who worked in her hotel's maintenance department, a man who probably had no idea how much those two simple words affected her, had wished her sweet dreams. Celeste fell asleep with her phone still in her hand and her heart doing that dangerous flutter that meant she was already too far gone to walk away safely. Tomorrow would change everything. She could feel it the way you can feel a storm coming, that electric quality in the air, that sense of inevitability. For the first time in 2 years, she couldn't wait for tomorrow to arrive. The beach Ryan had chosen was exactly as promised. Isolated, windswept, and somehow timeless. Celeste arrived 10 minutes early, parked beside Ryan's old pickup truck, and stood at the edge of the sand watching waves crash against dark rocks. She'd changed outfits 4 times that morning before settling on jeans, a cream sweater, and ankle boots. Her hair was loose, not pulled back in the severe bun she wore to board meetings. Just Celeste, as requested. "You came," Ryan's voice said behind her. She turned to find him walking up from the beach carrying 2 travel mugs. "Hot chocolate," he explained. "Figured coffee felt too much like yesterday." "Perfect." She wrapped her hands around the warm mug. They walked in silence for a while, following the tide line. The beach stretched empty in both directions. Speaking of endings, he took a breath. "There's something I need to tell you. Something about the Harley. And it might change how you see this." Celeste's heart started racing. "Okay." The bike didn't originally belong to Tom Brennan. Ryan's voice was steady but careful. "He bought it used 28 years ago from a man named Edward Davenport. Your father." The world seemed to tilt sideways. "What?" "Your father sold it to Tom when your mother was pregnant with you." Tom told me the whole story. Edward had bought the Harley as a young man before the hotel, when he was still figuring out who he wanted to be. But when your mother got pregnant, she made him choose, the motorcycle or the family. So he sold it to Tom, who promised to take care of it. Celeste felt tears burning in her eyes. "I never knew he had a motorcycle." Tom said Edward came by sometimes just to see it. They'd talk about engines and life. Tom said those conversations taught him more about being a man than anything else. Watching your father choose responsibility over pleasure, but never quite losing that part of himself. And now you have it. Now I have it. Ryan wiped a tear from her cheek. "And every time I ride it, I'm maintaining a piece of your father's history. A piece of who he was before he became Edward Davenport, hotel magnate." Celeste looked out at the ocean, trying to process this information. Her father, her careful, responsible, always professional father, had once been a man who rode a blue Harley-Davidson along these beaches, who'd loved it enough that giving it up had probably hurt even if he'd never said so. "Why didn't Tom give it back?" she asked. "After my father died, why didn't he offer it to you, to me?" "He tried. Came to the funeral. Approached your mother afterward. She told him to keep it, that you didn't need reminders of your father's reckless youth." Tom was heartbroken. He'd maintained that bike for nearly 30 years, hoping someday it would find its way back to the Davenport family. And when he died, he left it to me with one instruction. "If you ever meet Edward's daughter, make sure she knows her father was more than just a businessman. Make sure she knows he understood freedom before he chose responsibility. You knew who I was." The realization hit her. "Yesterday, on the highway, you knew." "No." Ryan shook his head firmly. "I had no idea. I'd seen photos of Edward, obviously. They're all over the hotel. But I'd never seen pictures of you beyond the official headshots on the company website, and those don't capture you, the real you. It wasn't until you said your name in the card that I realized who you were, and by then, I was already what? Already feeling something I hadn't felt in years." He took her hand, his calloused fingers warm against hers. "You have to believe me, Celeste. I didn't plan this. I didn't engineer some meet cute on the highway to get close to the boss's daughter. I was just a guy with a broken motorcycle, and you were just a woman who stopped to help. Everything else, the connection, the coffee, it's all been real." She wanted to be angry, wanted to feel manipulated or used, but looking into his eyes, she saw only honesty and vulnerability, and the same fear she felt, the terror of wanting something that could hurt you. "Show me," she said. "Show you what?" "Show me the bike, the Harley. I want to see the part of my father I never knew." They drove separately to the garage where Mike was working on the Harley. The mechanic greeted them with grease-stained hands and a knowing smile, pointing to the motorcycle in the back corner. And there it was. The blue Harley-Davidson, older than Celeste herself, sitting under fluorescent lights like a relic from another time. She approached it slowly, running her fingers along the seat, the chrome, the fuel tank where someone, her father decades ago, had added a small scratch that looked almost like a star. He told Tom that scratch happened on his 21st birthday, Ryan said quietly beside her. Laid the bike down taking a corner too fast, scraped the tank on the pavement, said it was a reminder that freedom has consequences, that you can love something and still hurt it if you're not careful. Celeste traced the star-shaped scratch, imagining her father at 21, young and reckless and utterly different from the man she'd known. She thought about him selling this bike, putting away that part of himself to be the husband and father and businessman everyone needed him to be. He must have missed it, she whispered. Tom said Edward never stopped missing it, but he also said your father never regretted the choice, that he talked about you all the time, about how becoming your father was the best thing that ever happened to him. The Harley represented freedom, but you represented purpose. She turned to Ryan, tears streaming freely now. I don't know how to feel about this. About you having this piece of him, about the universe bringing you into my life through the one thing that connects to his past. It feels like fate, and I don't believe in fate. Neither do I. Ryan's hands came up to frame her face, his touch gentle. But I believe in choice. Your father chose to sell the bike so he could build a life with your mother, build the Melbrook, build something that would outlast him. Tom chose to maintain it with love for 30 years, hoping it would mean something someday. And I'm choosing to stand here with you, terrified that I'm not good enough but hoping that maybe somehow I could be. Ryan, let me finish. His voice was shaking now. I'm not Edward Davenport. I'll never build empires or make millions or leave behind a legacy like his. I'm just a maintenance worker who fixes things and rides an old motorcycle and loves too hard and loses too often. But I see you, Celeste. Not the CEO, not the heiress, not the perfectly composed woman in the royal blue blazer. I see the person who stops in rainstorms and talks to her dead father's ghost and is brave enough to show up at a beach even when she's terrified. And I'm choosing that person if she'll let me. Celeste didn't think. Celeste. She just moved forward, closing the distance between them, and kissed him with everything she'd been holding back. His arms came around her immediately, pulling her close, and for the first time in 3 years, she felt something other than grief and responsibility and fear. She felt alive. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Ryan rested his forehead against hers. That's one hell of an answer. I'm choosing you too, she whispered. I'm choosing the mechanic who maintains my father's motorcycle with love, who reads maintenance logs like poetry, who shows up to work with dignity even when life hasn't been fair. I'm choosing the terrifying possibility that this could work, that we could build something real despite all the reasons we shouldn't. It won't be easy, he warned. Nothing worth having ever is. They stood there in the garage, wrapped around each other, while Mike pretended to work on something in the corner and gave them privacy. Outside, the California sun was setting, painting everything gold. I have an idea, Celeste said eventually, about the Harley, about honoring my father and Tom and everything this bike represents. I'm listening. Keep it, ride it, maintain it the way you have been. But sometimes, when you're not working, when we're not navigating the complicated mess of boss and employee, take me riding. Show me the roads my father loved, the places he went when he needed to remember who he was beyond his responsibilities. Help me know that part of him. Ryan's smile was brilliant. I'd be honored. 3 months later, Celeste stood in the parking lot of the Mel Brock Hotel at 6 a.m, wearing jeans and a leather jacket Ryan had bought her, watching him work on the Harley's engine with practiced ease. They'd figured out the complicated dance of their relationship, professional distance at work, genuine connection everywhere else. The board had concerns, her mother had opinions, but Celeste had learned something from her father's blue motorcycle. Sometimes you have to choose between safe and meaningful always wins. Ready? Ryan asked, straightening up and wiping his hands on a rag. Ready? She climbed on behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist, feeling the solid warmth of him against her. The Harley rumbled to life beneath them, that particular growl that had once been her father's favorite sound. As they pulled out onto Coast Highway, the sun just beginning to rise over the mountains, Celeste understood finally what her father had given up and what he'd gained. Freedom for purpose, youth for legacy, the open road for the daughter who would someday find her way back to it. She pressed closer to Ryan, feeling the wind in her hair and the power of the engine beneath them and the possibility of a future she was brave enough to choose. Some loves, she'd learned, aren't built despite the obstacles, but because of them. Some connections are forged across differences and dead mentors and blue motorcycles that carry the ghosts of men who understood what really mattered. And some endings, she thought as the hotel disappeared in the rearview mirror and new roads stretched ahead, are really just the beginning of something worth riding toward.